This is called the Hackening. That's the name of our talk. You obviously know that. My name is Matt Lee. I'm the Senior Director of Security and Compliance at a company called Pax8. We're a cloud marketplace. We sell cloud stuff to people that buy cloud stuff. I actually ran a managed service provider. We're going to talk about what I mean by that. And successfully exited as a service provider 3 years ago. But when I was named Director of Security for that service provider, I lost $3 million to Sun No Kibi, our evil ransomware gang, in 2019. And that really kickstarted why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, if that makes sense. So if we get into what my personal why is, it is that once you lose $3 million like that and you realize everybody else is in the same boat, you start having a mission. Jason, if you'll introduce yourself.
Yep. My name is Jason Slagle. I am president of CWR Inc. I am a managed services provider. We target 25 to 150 user endpoints. We do a lot of bigger project work, a lot of because of time here. We merged with Penn last year. I am normally a giant ball of energy. I'm a little under the weather. So if I'm a little less energetic than I've been in my past talks, that would be why.
We have some other people we want to thank that were part of this project over the last 6 months. My loving wife, Kat Lee, she did OSINT and gathered a lot of information, so enumeration, data entry, and reporting. Tom Lawrence brought the dank memes and some sweet infrastructure and a lot of connections, which was awesome. And John Hammond brought us some dark web data and a lot more to come as we go, but also our spirit animal. So he's the reason for us in doing this in some ways. All right, cool. I want to thank FlexTrack. I don't know if y'all are in the room, but FlexTrack donated an instance of FlexTrack to us to allow us to do this with what we're doing. So I just want to give super kudos to them. And also Huntress for letting us, bug John every now and again, being awesome in general. So that's it I had to say.
The only way you can actually ever get a hold of John is to ping him on Huntress's
Don't
Slack.
put that away.
Well, no one is on it. It doesn't matter.
Good. You're good.
So you ping John on Slack and say, hey, go look at the signal I sent you. Yeah.
So how did this start, right? We were sitting in a hallway one day at a conference. It was Tom and Jason and I. And what did they do? They walked up to us and said, our presenter that's doing how to hack MSPs can't make it. His plane didn't get in. He's not going to be able to speak. And so they asked if we could just put something together.
Cool.
That was perfectly timed.
Yeah. This is like an hour before the talk is supposed to happen, by the way. Yeah. So we had like 1 hour to come up with the talk that we'd never given before.
Yeah. And so we've given it 3 or 4 times now. What was interesting is it's the #1 attended talk. And we're going over basic techniques that a lot of you in the room do every day, very easily. And it blew people's minds in our space. We'll get into that here in a bit. And so we've given this to about 2,000 people probably now.
Yep. Then we got drunk.
Yep.
After we did it last time, sat in a ring and said, what if we really did it? What if we actually sat down and hacked MSPs? And a terrible idea was born.
That is a true story. And it was started by this. We wanted to say, why did we do this, right? And is it because we believe that MSPs suck? Is it because we think they're not going to be secure, but the security posture is okay? Like, why do we want to do this? If you think about it, the GDP of the United States and all globally is supported by about 43% that is small to mid-sized business. We're going to get into the stats on that here in a bit. And they're well below the cybersecurity poverty line, well below. Then they're being served by MSPs that also fall in the same exact space. And so we wanted to know where were they? And we wanted to offer this as a start to a project from a research project.
And admittedly, we naively thought we would easily win.
Oh, 100%. I was like,
you'll see later that it's a little more complicated than that. We definitely have some wins, but not the ones we thought we would get. And we wanted to level up our own skills. Like I'm an MSP, right? Like I have skills area, but most of my stuff is binary analysis, reverse engineering kind of stuff. We wanted to play, right? So
yeah, and then to call it out, like I've done a lot of the techniques that I wanted to do in a perfect lab environment many times. And that gives you somewhat of a false sense of confidence sometimes, I think, as we'll find through this. All right, so we put out a call to action on LinkedIn. I think my post got 130,000 views or so. That's actually Kyle Hanselman wearing a beard pretending to be me on Huntress Hackett the first year. So I figured that'd be the perfect picture to use for it. And then Tom brought up this awesome meme for us to use. And we got quite a few people to go into it. Anything you want to add on this one?
No, I mean, we left it open for people to sign up for a couple months. And we'll get into some stats here shortly as to what people actually did.
Yeah. All right. So why did they sign up, right? Why did these MSPs sign up is the question.
We asked them.
Yeah, we did. And we have this right here. Some of the things they said. I'm a large MSP that recently switched to RMM solutions and removed AD. I want to see if this is different after heavy infrastructure changes.
That was probably a mistake.
Yep. And they actually have not had a pen test. In fact, most of these people have said we've not had a pen test, giving further proof, I think, to the point of MSPs not necessarily being where they need to be. One of the things that stood out, and Jason, I'll let you take it from here, is this bottom one says, I have always wanted to do something like this. I really think some of our stack may have undisclosed vulnerabilities. That's their fear. Their fear is that their tool vendor has created something, and that's the only problem. I'll let that sit.
And to be fair, it happens, right? Like we've in our industry, we've had a big Kaseya incident in July 4th of 2021. Earlier this year, we had an incident with Screen Connect that luckily through mostly because I think the threat actors didn't realize what they actually had, ended up not being nearly as bad as it could have been.
Like, wow, we got an RCE. No, you had thousands of machines connected you couldn't control.
Anyways, for that one, we definitely saw that like 85% of the instances on the internet were pops, but they were fixed before the
PAs.
Yeah, the initial threat actors knew what they had. They thought they just had a machine compromised. They didn't realize that machine could control a $5,000 machine door. We would have had a real fucking bad time.
Yep.
And I'm on a bunch of security councils on various MSP groups, and one of them is called ASCII, right? And I sent in that council, and I'm trying to push like, hey, align yourself with CIS, do IG2, probably is a minimum as an MSP. But all these other MSPs wanted to do is they wanted to talk about third-party vendor risk, right? They wanted to do questionnaires for all the vendors to fill out because they stupidly believe that that is their only risk model. We have data that indicates that somewhere in the 80% range of MSP compromises are credential misuse. They're fucking stupid. Cyber hygiene 101 stuff.
100%. All right. One of the things I want to call out is we knew we had to protect ourselves, right? Like the dang memes. Thank you for the laughs. That's all Tom Lawrence. Yeah. So we wanted to figure out a way to protect ourselves, and we'll get into a little more of that later. But we had a legal agreement donated. One of our attorneys in our space donated about 6 hours of work with us to write a legal agreement for a pen test. I had $100 of liability, and that's it.
Yeah, and we could do whatever we wanted. Like the agreement is stupid. There's no scoping.
It's a test. I wanted to see how many would sign something and said I could literally go kick over their server in the middle of the night, and it wouldn't matter, right? Because we don't get that kind of capability. You get very scoped and limited. We said no scope. There is no scope. We're not going to touch your vendors. We're not going to touch your clients. That's the only scope. So of those, we didn't have a lot of people push back. We got people sign them, but we did have a couple that were on the more secure side that had some thoughts.
We had one that said, I don't have any office space. I only have everyone remote. Are you going to come to my house? Are you kidding me?
If we get to that part, we're back to the XKCD guy with the pipe, right? Like in this stage. Yeah, no, we were not doing that. But one said they were going to sign us for the risk. And that I actually was very happy about. We're going to call that out in a larger data set, but not today.
Yeah.
And so we did have one say, we just don't want that kind of risk. This is one-sided. And we said, yes, it is.
And we had a couple that wanted red lines to it. Like, I'm not redlining this. I have enough that have signed this thing that if you don't want to do it, I don't really care.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. So we had a one-sided assignment. And I want to make sure to dispel this myth. I did a talk for a bunch of Fortune 100 CISOs. And I kept realizing every time I said MSP, they had this one pattern belief in their mind because they're from that enterprise space. And that is of this very, very linear, very, very enterprise-like service, don't chuckle, but to the point of being able to say, here's my SLA, my SLOs, here's what I'm going to do for you, here's the service, here's my very walled gates, here's my responsibility models. That's it. These MSPs aren't them. Yep. The MSPs we're talking about probably worked at Best Buy or a wine store last Thursday, right? And they started up and said, hey, I'm an MSP. In fact, I had a post that I put up on LinkedIn, and it just got the most views. It's like 230,000 views of me just making a sticky note that says MSP. And it's because in our world, all you have to do to be an MSP is say, I'm an MSP. When you're selling to a 25 user environment, the sophistication level of that consumer is not extremely high. And they don't have any of those requirements. They also aren't willing to pay for it. We're going to dig into that in a minute.
In our data, like, I know a lot of MSPs, right? We speak a lot in this space. I just am friends with a lot of them. Almost every MSP I come across is essentially a guy that was like a tier 2, tier 3 help desk guy that got tired of working for somebody and said, fuck you, all I can do is myself. They usually learn that there's a lot more to it and they end up hating life later, but that is where the average MSP comes from.
And I'm not trying to be pejorative. I'm just trying to set the expectations so you understand what we're talking about from a constituency perspective. If anybody wants to know my super happy space, I like picking apart frameworks. This actually comes from a working group where we put about 2,000 hours into breaking out the CIS safeguards into their constituent taxonomy components. But CIS 18.1 says, have a pen testing program commensurate with the sophistication of your organization or the risk of your organization to that extent. When you think about it as an MSP, I had about 30 million in revenue, but even the smallest ones are in the, 400,000 in revenue range. They managed anywhere between 20 and my 700 clients that I had in their full managed services. And my risk, Jason Slagle and I both work on CompTIA's Trustmark Advisory. We were making a set of controls for MSPs. And we had to determine what is the risk of an MSP. And the simplest equation we can come up with is, it is the summation of the risk of the credentials they hold with their clients, right? It is that access that they have. They have some legal protections, obviously. My point I'm trying to make is MSPs should be at least IG2, as Jason feels, and IG3, 4 plus, which doesn't exist, as I feel, right? And they're not even pen testing. So we have a whole constituency selling millions of dollars in revenue, taking money from small to mid-sized business and offering these services, and they're not even protecting themselves. I'm not saying pen testing their customers. They're not even pen testing themselves. That was evident in our statements of why they wanted to sign up, right? And these are some of the biggest too. Okay. Additionally to this, we gave a talk at GERCON last year called MSPs Suck, but the World Without Them is Worse, in which we made some arguments based on the data that there's no other way to solve this. And we won't beleaguer. Let's Slagle, if you want to kind of tackle this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems here is, so I target in my MSP companies in the 25 to 150 user, like full user, right? Most of the companies I service are considerably less than $5 million a year in revenue, right? Like, if $5 million a year in revenue, or we'll make the math easy, go to $1 million, 6%, where I'm $60,000, $70,000 worth of total technology spend that I have available to me for the entire
the
year.
laptop, the switch, right? Let's just put it in perspective.
Like, when you have to replace the server, if assuming you're doing any on-prem stuff, that's a bad year for you. Yeah, like, you completely blow your budget, right? So these companies, they just don't have money, right? And we understand. I understand. Most of you in here are probably security practitioners. You think we all suck. You think MSPs suck. Dude, a lot of us do fucking suck. True story, right? So, but some of that suck is just driven by economic factors, right? Like, I think most MSPs don't set out to suck. They just don't have any money, right?
Yeah.
The average MSP is like $3 million a year in revenue. How much money do they have to spend on this stuff, right? Like, they can't afford your $30,000 pen test. Like, they just can't afford it. They would do it if they could, and they just don't.
Yeah. And we did one, but that was at 40 million in revenue when we did ours, right? It was a long time before that. There was a lot of risk up to that 40 million in revenue, right? Okay. All right. Some of the high level stats of what signed up. We had 62 MSPs that filled out the initial interest form and asked for us to be involved. There were 5 different countries that responded to this. We had a single person all the way up to a few hundred endpoints on the small end, and some that were 200 plus, actually 500 plus employees on the one, and over 40,000 endpoints. In their care. 26 signed our legal agreement. So right away, 26 of the 62 did not have legal counsel. Well, we're not using them. Okay? It was really ugly. If I show you this thing, you'd laugh at me. It's horrible. I actually asked my attorney to be as ugly as he could be. And he said, they'll never accept that. No, we're good. They did. Promise. They did. 7 or so we picked. And that was mainly just sheer bandwidth and time. We're going to get to that here in a bit. But we picked 7 of them. We'll share some of that data. Anything we'll cover on that?
I mean, we put about 200 total hours into this up to this point, not including the time it took to gather the data to put the talk together. We've got some additional, things we'll talk about as to where some of that time was spent. I
will say there were some interesting ones that stood out. And it is actually somewhat of my side thesis that I won't bore you with right now. But a lot of these MSPs are moving towards identity-centric practices. They don't have infrastructure. They're moving to SaaS consumption, some degree of SRMs with others, right? You're starting to get into a world where it might be a little more scalable, in my opinion. So we had some that had zero infrastructure. There literally was nothing to enumerate, which was interesting.
Makes life hard.
We will say, yeah, for sure. All right, this is how we felt as we started going down this path, right? How the heck? And what the heck have we gotten ourselves into? And again, I remind you, we're not all full-time practitioners doing red teaming or doing pen tests. In fact, we didn't do this as a pen test where I'm going to drop an agent off in your network. We did this as a full red team. We're not going to add or anything external to internal if we can, right? Is the way we approached this. So we were like, holy crap. Additionally, and I know I'm starting to learn that, are any of you in the room pen testers today, red teamers or pen testers today? Just a few, a few of you. I have to imagine you have an amazing process. And the reason is I will do this and go, oh my God, shiny object. Oh my God, shiny object. And I will chase holes for hours. And I have to imagine the only way to solve that is process that forces you to go down a certain path to be in a certain stage as you go. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to pick your brain later. But ADHD is a superpower and a curse. Anything to add on this one?
No, we'll go to the next one.
Here's why.
Yeah. So
There's a few of them.
as my MSP, I have 56 different tools that my users can log into. Not all of them have every tool, but there are like I have a service provider tool account directory, and there are 56 of them. I thought I had a lot of tools until I dabbled into your space. Holy shit, you guys have a problem.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, because even the river spray is just a build on several other people in this room. So
We spent about 50 total hours, and the 200 hours we spent were just setting up tools. Like, holy crap. Like,
building infrastructure, obfuscating infrastructure, taking Microsoft cease and desist notices, those things, the fun times.
I do want to give a shout out to the Black Lantern.
Oh, God.
Because we used the shit out of those
Yeah,
tools.
Trevor Spray.
We learned a lot about those tools. And Bebop was actually really sweet too.
Yeah, Graph Runner too. I didn't call that out here, but Graph Runner's also in that space. So it sent us down paths where we kept pivoting and doing different things. So we've had lots of findings. There weren't any direct path at this point. All right. Fuck you. Okay. So I spent an entire day trying to knock over a Zyzel modem or router that was available at a perfect 9.8. Because, if your bone scanner tells you it's a 9.8, then by golly, you should be able to execute on it, right?
9.8 exploit the LE, right?
Same thing with, what was that, a Johnson's control system that we've tried to take over? Yeah.
And he spent about a half a day doing that, right? And finally, I'm like, what are you used to working on that, man? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, dude, the memory layout's probably different. Or any number of other billion things that make that particular device, or somebody came by and already popped it and monkey patched it. A lot of these IoT things, that's my experience, is that somebody's driven by the entire internet with the bot and basically monkey patched them, so you can't knock them over anymore. We had, on top of the couple that we had there, we had a couple of ASAs that we spent hours trying to do directory disclosure.
I did get a lot of findings, though. That wasn't too bad. I didn't get any full wins there, but yeah. All right, so this is what we took away from this, is that it is a lot harder, or at least it's different, when you see MSPs that have shifted to full identity centrism and are starting to use those type of models. Because now it's account takeovers through token thefts or password spraying or things against Microsoft architecture. And it just changes it, right? It changes the skill set from the traditional to very identity-centric. And for anybody that's laughing at me, again, not a full-time pen tester. So I just have a PNPT. That's it. So just debating. All right. So what do we do? Again, just debate it.
Yeah,
actually.
We started where you would start at the beginning of this. Yeah, dude, this is my favorite right here. That's actually my dad picture. I apologize. Yeah, DALL-E does great. If you ever put together a slide presentation, just type the most ridiculous prompt you can think of into DALL-E and tell you on 16:9. Greatness comes out of it. So we started really simple. The way you signed up was a Google form. I basically set that Google form up to go to a Sheets, and then we just kept adding columns to the Sheets stuff. And we started doing a whole lot of manual OSINT stuff. I'm on Domain Toolbox, trying to figure out what their MX record is, going through SPF records to try to figure out what tools we're using.
Sometimes they leave IDs in there that are juicy.
We're going to their websites to figure out, do they list staff on their website? Do they list the tool sets they use? A remarkable number of MSPs will advertise who all their clients are and who all their vendors are, which makes it super great if you're trying to figure out what the fuck's actually going on there. Eventually that fell apart. Those of you in the room that do this for a living probably realize the errors of our ways that you just can't drop it inside of a spreadsheet.
So we reached out and got some tools and some help. Obviously, these don't do any enumeration or anything, but just helped us do better tagging and management of the data, sorting of the data, management of the findings and all of that. So we moved on to FlexTrack.
And it will make our lives easier, because the one thing we did tell these people they would get in exchange for us doing this is a report of our findings. So this will make it, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, so straight out of export Nessus import here. Yeah, at least for some of them anyway. All right, so thanks. Figured that was later. All right, so we then pivoted to actually doing some of the work in a more automated fashion, right? We started doing, obviously, Nessus instead of manually poking and in mapping to make that simpler for what we're doing. We started moving on to enumeration of accounts, enumeration of identities, enumeration of space, using more scalable tools, right? Things like Trevor Spray make great enumeration of Microsoft space. We'll get into some of that here in a bit. But we moved from manual tools to automated tools where possible, which helped us a lot in that space. Great example of that is Trevor Spray. We'll get into some of this. We'll bring back up in our findings section. But if you notice, we're doing enumeration of email addresses. Very good at that by brute force. And we'll get into why that can be a problem and something you could change if you are a defensive practitioner. It might make this a little harder for me.
And we did some password spraying too. Again, naive. I don't know how many accounts we locked out, but it was non-zero number of them.
Oh, wait, non-zero. Big vector, non-zero. Like a lot. Yeah. And not just smart lockouts, boys. Anyways. All right.
And then we ended a good amount. Matt went down his Zyzal rabbit hole. I went down a Burp Suite rabbit hole and spent way too fucking long at a bunch of web portals. Got some really interesting findings there, like the
great LDAP
that environment, like on the internet with all the debug shit on, because I will poke it and it will give me all sorts of juicy information.
It was also nice to test on that one client. All of the email addresses, they had their LDAP best endpoint still up and connected as part of that. So instead of testing Microsoft, I'll just test this source where you have way less defenses in play. We had old architecture.
And we did end up on top of the exploratory stuff, playing with some custom target modules inside of Trevor Spray to his point, like they had a web portal that we had determined the debug was tied to an LDAP endpoint. So like, yeah, it had none of the same control that
Microsoft protects it.
I spent a non-zero amount of time just manually poking at things. And then we got to the super sadness stuff.
It's true. I think I lost 4 domains in the process. I reached out to Kuba and got some great advice on how to obfuscate using Cloudflare on the front end of my phishing for evil Genix, and then do some things to protect the header so it wasn't read, and change all the things to obfuscate that with the skill level of a 3 out of 10, obviously.
Yeah, and we would go through, we'd get an entire infrastructure set up, we'd test it, we'd make sure everything working, and 2 hours later it was dead.
Fuck. Yeah, so, yeah. So there was a lot of time in that. We did get functional infrastructure, and we were able to harvest some session tokens, but there were some controlled session tokens, right, just to validate. But every time you do it, you just start down that clock for Microsoft or Google smart paging it or whatever it may be, right? So,
and we're not done yet, right? Like our agreements go to the end of the year, right? So we are continuing. We did take a pause here for the past 2 weeks to basically pivot to pull the data together to give this talk, but we will be back to doing this, and our next round of this is almost all going to be identity-based attacks.
Yep.
So only to get really good at it will fail really hard.
Yeah. One of the things that we found, though, as we got in, so we're now in the findings section. What did we find?
I'll TLDR. We didn't get full takeover on anybody, surprisingly. We thought this was going to be super easy, and we'd walk in, and I knew that we weren't going to find some super juicy 9.8 connect unpassed screen connect that's attached to the internet, because understand that if it's on the internet and it's vulnerable, it's already popped, right? Like we're going to have to do something secret. I know a lot of you red team people have exploits and stuff that you hide in your back pocket that we don't know about, right? We don't have any of that shit, so we weren't able to immediately pop anything externally.
All right. I will say we were marked safe from all but one MSP noticing our attacks. So that's all those accounts we locked out, no phone calls.
Yeah,
nothing.
We had 47 accounts that went out this locked out at one point.
Yeah, and nothing, not nothing at all. Even with the detections, a lot of these already have SOC services. They're paying someone else to watch and monitor those identities. They've been told to reach out to us if they find stuff, and they haven't, except for one. And this one was fun. We'll get talking about that in a little bit. All right. So some global stats. Of all 62 of them, and we're just getting a little bit of the research that we've been looking at, but 80% of them use Entra ID as their primary identity source. Not any other thing to go attack. 80% are just Microsoft as an identity on the front end. And if you're familiar with what you can do with conditional access, you can get pretty interesting with that.
But I will say that you can get pretty interesting with that, but based on the evidence I have, not very many were, right? We should have been thwarted a lot quicker with the spraying attacks we were doing, and we were not, right? So there were 2 out of the 7 that we were actively attacking that I could tell had some sort of conditional access.
And one was $100 million guarantee, so for sure. All right, 45% or 2860 seconds use Cloudflare. So only 45% are actually putting CF tunnels in front of the infrastructure they do hold. And still,
of those 45%,
I guess that up by one because one didn't have infrastructure. So
yeah, well, and I mean, and of that 45%, we were able to find the origin servers, probably half of those, right? So,
Yeah, they'd either put it in their SPF record and like share that IP, even though it's now behind Cloudflare, they'd do that.
or you could find it in binary trails that it used to point to and now point here.
Yeah, exactly.
The original IP is clearly the origin.
It really wasn't hard to find, even once they had done Cloudflare from that perspective.
100% of them were able to determine what tool stacks they use. That doesn't surprise me, right? Because, for instance, the PSA use, the professional services automation, the help desk system that we use, they send emails to us, right? So if they're your fucking SPF record, we can find it. If you like clients put tickets in, your ticket portal is probably linked from your website, right?
You want that remote support button. We know which one it is, right? So those kind of things.
In almost in 100% of cases, we were able to determine what their primary big high-level tool stacks were.
Yeah, 100% had subdomains to enumerate, and I'll give a caveat to this. The ones that didn't have infrastructure, their subdomains pointed off to like stats and stuff, right? So everybody had stuff. Everybody had stuff. 60 seconds expose the IP of their hosts and SPF records. So there's a good percentage of them that have IPs or A records they own that are in there. 55% have their employees on their website, right? And you and I have some different arguments on this, but
I think there's two schools of thought there, right? We did for a long time, and I took all but the leadership team off of it and the sales team. And the reason that we did it first was, well, then a client can look on the website and the person calling them, they can know that they're legitimate.
Because they're definitely going to do that.
But then naively, I'm like, oh, yeah, well, then it's the bad guy can just see the employee too and can call. That's not actually a way to verify anyone. So we have a different method of doing that we're working on rolling out. So now we pulled that off, but the vast majority of them did list employees, and a significant portion of them listed clients, right?
Yeah.
So like you can, I surmise that that's a bad idea, right? Because threat actor comes across your website and you're like, shit, if I get this guy, I get all these guys too? Score.
Yeah. And I would just use it to impersonate those clients. I have a very easy path to know they're going to know I'm a client, and I should have contact information. It should be pretty easy.
Especially if they use something like Team.
Which was not our scope. Yeah, you didn't want to do social engineering against their clients. That's part of the scope. Yeah. All right, so the ones we selected, the 7 we selected, there were 376 hosts in that space that we scanned.
7 MSPs, 376 hosts.
7 MSPs, 376 hosts. Like a lot of hosts for those MSPs. There were 58 critical vulns. There's a lot of that was SSL stuff, which is really kind of a pain. It's not as meaningful in that regard. So there's about 30% of that was SSL related. But the rest of them were actual information disclosures. They were things that we should have been able to execute against as well. So total high 373. 2 out of 7 use Cloudflare in that cohort, which that
wasn't an accident, right? Like so when we were choosing them, I was obviously choosing ones I thought we could win at. And Cloudflare makes things more complicated. They definitely start shutting your shit down when you start scanning it. I'm pretty sure I signed up for a node to get an instance to get a /64 to spray, and they denied my sign up. And I'm pretty sure it's because my home IP ended up with bad reputation.
I definitely did. I had problems with Cloudflare now at home. I did some mistakes.
Yeah, Cloudflare's had added me for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And then again, a lot of them list their employees, and it's easy to tell their tool stack. So I will say the one biggest theme I think we took out of this, and I don't believe this is going to be a surprise for anybody, is the big MSPs that just buy people literally let that shit sit for the rest of its life until the bits fall off the disks. They just run. They leave old infrastructure up. In fact, 62% of those hosts was one MSP that had just been gobbling up MSPs and leaving their infrastructure up.
And of that 62%, like 80% of the 62% were acquisitions that was clear this was aged infrastructure that was no longer being touched.
100%. It even had a certificate in the portal. It said, hey, if you need something from 2 years before 2021, please click this, right? Like, yeah, 100% of it's still up, still containing data, still having access to things, but not needed necessarily. And I think one of the things we think in this one particular MSP, we know we'll get an application win somewhere down the road. We know that. There's just so much old infrastructure, so much old code, old versions of the same portal. We know we'll find something there, or a credential or something to those things.
This is the MSP that it's running some sort of EYI-based framework that does their client portal, but it's in debug mode. So if you poke various endpoints with various things, it starts spitting the code out to you, which is actually pretty convenient.
Yeah, this is some of the examples of those acquisitions individually, right? So in the first acquisition, there's 10. In the next acquisition, you had 133 highs on those hosts that they had there still. And what's interesting, and we're going to get into this in just a sec, how do we find all those old acquisitions? Some of it's just searching Google, right? Looking for PR releases. This company buys this company. right? So it's that, but by God, Trevor Spray makes it simple. And we'll get into that in a second, right? Each one of the acquisitions all had infrastructure that had massive numbers of vulnerabilities still sitting that are all there for findings to look at. There's information explosions, other things that are there as well, and leave up a lot of old infrastructure as well that still runs in those data centers.
Yeah.
Trevor Spray.
Yeah. So one of the things we started trying to do so we could target some of the phishing stuff we're doing, as well as targeting some of the password spraying, is we're trying to enumerate accounts. And one of the things that I found was that almost every one of these MSPs were using first initial last name as their username pattern. We use first name. Like, I'm just Jason at cnwr.com.
Here's why this matters.
It turns out that makes enumeration really easy.
Yeah. It goes from like, if I was just doing first name and I did the first 10,000 most popular first names, not too bad to get a good basis of the overall name.
Yeah. So with first initial last name, with 163,000 requests based on the number of employees they knew they had, I had about, for the representative MSPs I looked at, I had about 60% of their users enumerated with 163,000 requests.
Yep.
For the MSPs that were doing first name, not last name, sending 2 million requests, which takes forever, would only give me about 30% of their user base, right? So that natively makes sense, right? You have more entropy and more key space if you do first out last. And that's a thing that I had never considered is something that mattered. But
yeah, it got to a point where we would have to spend days and days on this one MSP just to finish enumerating, to even get like maybe to the top 60% or so is what we were trying to shoot for. So we did find a lot of valid accounts. It just took a lot of time.
And this is one of the ones that I'm pretty sure had some sort of CA policy or something in there. So
they did.
We got back. Yeah.
And we were doing a bunch of IPv6 to like have different exit places. One of the things Trevor Spray does well is Trevor Proxy and Trevor using extensibility of IPv6. So that helps a lot for those endpoints that you're using. But still, we're getting blocked out. So let's cover some of the good news. I want to put a little bit of the hope in there we got out of this.
And again, we did not have a full MSP takeover. We thought we would get one. Did we ever define what a full win would be? Like, to me, if I could get into the RMM tool as a win,
that would have win, right?
That's setting that did a win. Yeah. And you look at their clients.
A lot of their Screen Connect, we went to their Screen Connect instances, they're all tied to Microsoft, which means I still have to go right back to popping an identity, right? They don't leave a lot of those old interfaces up. A lot of these MSPs, and again, remember, these are the self-selected MSPs that thought they were in great shape. And they have very robust identity and IAM practices to some extent comparative to the others. The rest of that field of 30,000 MSPs that we have in our space did not sign up. And so we're not looking at that space. So a little self-selectedness. One that really stood out was awesome. We got 165,418 I'm a little teapots during our scan. It was dope. And the girl actually did the research and she reaches out on the left there to me in LinkedIn and says, hey, Matt, is this IP address and howIwouldhackyou.com? You, because I looked at a YouTube search and I found this IP address with you. And so she said, if so, you got 165,418 I'm a little teapots. You can go look that up. It's a hypertext copy control protocol. It's an RFC joke.
This is another one of those amazing AI images. And I think it's great that if you squint a little bit, that kind of looks like Chris Roberts.
It does. Has a Chris Roberts flair. If he's yelling bloody something out, we know we're at him. All right. And then the next thing is we had a social engineering attempt. This kid lost his mind. I realized that I couldn't get as much delivery of my links through Microsoft. And so we were pivoting to seeing if I could social engineer someone into clicking a device-based registration link from GraphRunner. And so I was reaching out to this kid and I said, hey, I need you to test out my beard banter sign up for your boss, if you don't mind. And the kid he connected with me, didn't say anything for a day, and that next day his boss sent me an email and said, hey man, this kid's freaking out. He blocked you on LinkedIn. I told him it's okay. This is actually an engagement we really are doing.
So that was one thing. We very much tried to avoid cheating, right? Like, we have some standing in the MSP space, right? So we have some ability to probably get people to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. They should know better, honestly, because I am just nothing but trouble. Like, it never take food from me. But it's probably 9 million Scoville unit chocolate or something equally dreadful. People should generally know better, but I do believe that we could cheat and win, right? We could reach out. He reached out to an intern. Like, we kind of talked about it because he was at our Rickford GERCon. He came in and we spent like 12 hour days working on this. And we did decide that, okay, well, if the person doesn't directly know us, then we won't consider it cheating. And yeah, he got noticed and the boss reached out.
Yeah, it was great. So I will say also, I've actually dealt with another incident with a much larger MSP where a real threat actor has actually started text messaging all of his employees and saying, "Hey, meet me on a Saturday, and we'll pay you $1 million if you give us access into the system." And those MSP actually they did report it. So they are pretty aware of their attack surface in that way a little bit. All right. So now what? It dawned on us in some ways that we know we're not good enough to do this, but there is a problem. We have a constituency that is not served, that there isn't a product, an automated pen test doesn't work for that purpose, right? That there is a need for these type of services. And we also are involved in different colleges, right? And Jason, you're involved at the University of Toledo.
Yep, University of Toledo.
Yeah, University of Toledo. And what we realized is there's a lot of college kids going through their capstone projects or in their red teaming. And it's just like Arizona, they have a great range. But in my range experience, I'm 100% accurate. It works great. They don't get real world experience. They don't get to see it. They don't get to actually do it. And what we decided to do was say, we want some help. We want to expand the charge and ask for some of the professionals in this room, and as we give this talk several other places, to help us out, to donate your time in several different ways. We've formed a charity. We run what's called an emergency response team for MSPs through CompTIA, and we've spun it off into our own 501c3. And we donate our time when MSPs are going through a major compromise. Back to my point, I went through being compromised from a company we bought called Voldemort. We'll never say their name again. That got compromised and all 1,200 endpoints getting detonated by Sodinokibi ransomware. And so now I know what that feels like, and I know what the steps were for that next 18 months of my life. And so we help be coaches for those MSPs and going through. We've had 7 cases this year. Well, I do it in perspective.
Direct instant response in most cases, mostly doing the shit that you don't think about. Like, are your employees fed, right? Like, can we help you put a schedule together? Do you need some hands on the ground? Can we arrange local resources to come help you restore backups, right? Like,
so we're going to take this charity and we are going to hang the paper for college students exiting on their capstone projects to be able to have a real target to do where they adopt an MSP, build a curricula that we give them to go through for enumeration, OSINT gathering information, things of that nature, and then writing up a pen test report and being guided through that. And what we need help with is several things. We need help with curriculum development. We want to help build what is that path, like the people that live this. I'd love to see what is that path of things. Now, I understand it can't be permanent. Those things are going to shift. T2Ps are going to shift. The methods you have to use are going to shift. I understand that. We have some things we'll try to draw as what's success. We need some coaching and guidance, right? We'd love some help from anybody in the room that wants to get involved in this stupid project and give back a little bit. Bless you. We also need skills if you're willing to help guide in any way. And if you're new and want to participate and you're already going through this same journey, I'd love to give you a lot of legal protections to go do things as long as you follow the rules and stay in the space. No DDoSes, no touching the clients, that kind of stuff.
And the thing that kind of drove this home for me, right, is I'm on the Industrial Advisory Board at the University of Toledo Cybersecurity Program, and I go and I lecture those kids. Usually they bring me in as a person in the field, right? So I get an hour with master level students once a year or once a semester. They're fucking clueless. Like, they have learned all of this theoretical stuff. They learned all this theoretical stuff where they understand how it's worked. Maybe they've gone through a cyber range. But as Matt alluded to, like, you go through something like a try Hackening or something like that, and man, you think this shit's easy, right? Because those things are set up for you to win.
100%.
Right? So
even my PhD still, I spent days on it, but it was set up for me to have a success path for free, right? There was going to be a win there. And I think the real world often provides different challenges.
So yeah, I think it was important to me that can we provide students actual targets that they can use to do this? And some of that idea came from a group in Peoria where he spoke at B-Sides last year, where they had one SMB a year that the students would target and they would write the report. We apparently have MSPs stupid enough to sign our legal agreement, and our legal agreement says it's us or assignees. Guess what? That group of students over here at this university is now the assignees we're giving on this. Right? So we can hold this and we can hold the paper. We can let the universities do it because, like, especially state universities, they ain't got to sign shit that has any liability at all attached to it, right? So if I hold the liability, there's no problem there, and we can hopefully notably make a difference for students.
Papa CompTIA is paying our insurance. Okay. So any questions? Like, even if it's just you guys are stupid, I'm totally fine with that. Anybody got a question for us?
Yeah. So the question was, we had some success with phishing. Did we get anywhere with it? The answer to that generally is no. Most of the successes we've had were relatively limited, and we weren't able to pivot from it. We expect that as we spin up more identity-based stuff and actually figure out how to obfuscate this. As it turns out, the people we reached out to in the industry weren't willing to burn their TCPs to help a bunch of knuckleheads do dumb shit. I get it. I wouldn't burn mine either. So, you know.
Yeah, John literally wrote back and said, we'd love to, but my guys are afraid of burning their TCPs.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. Yeah, that's an honest answer. We'll take it. All right. Thank y'all so much for being here. If there's no other questions, we appreciate y'all and just wanted to share what the SNA is going through.